Hello, everybody. Welcome to the NYCERDA Commercial Tenant Program webinar on financing strategies with the New York Green Bank and NYCEEC. And we're going to get started in just a minute. Thanks so much. Okay, well, I think that gives everybody enough time to arrive. I'm just going to go over a few logistics as we get started here. So welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Ellie Dietz, and I'm a project consultant at ERS, and I'm on the outreach team at NYCERDA's Commercial Tenant Program. And I'm joined today by Andrew Kessler, Managing Director at the New York Green Bank, and Patrick O'Donnell, the Director of Engineering at NYCEEC, who will both be describing different financing solutions for energy efficiency projects in commercial buildings. Before we get started, I want to address a few just logistics. First, the slides will be shared with everyone afterwards. The webinar is also being recorded, and a link to the recording will go out to all who registered after this session. And then finally, this session is eligible for AIA credits. If you'd like to receive credit for attending this webinar, but you did not enter your AIA number when you registered, just please email Jordan Cohen. Her email is on the left-hand side there, and I'll flash that at the end of the presentation as well, so just so people have it. And if you have any questions at any point, you can use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. There's a tab there, excuse me. There's a tab there, it should be right next to the chat function. We're going to ask that people use the Q&A tab instead of the chat. As you'll see, it'll be a little bit easier for us to address questions that way. And with that, I'll just get us started with a little bit of context about the Commercial Tenant Program and why we're interested in financing solutions. Excuse me. Okay, so I'd just like to get started with a reminder that tenant spaces consume more than 50% of the energy used in commercial buildings. So it's imperative that we move this market segment toward greater efficiency. And that is what the Commercial Tenant Program is all about. It's focused on driving energy efficiency in tenant spaces, engaging commercial office tenants in energy efficiency in a way that speaks the language of all the stakeholders that are involved in this equation. Because we do need to engage not only tenants, of course, but also commercial building owners and managers, the design community, and even brokers to help scale up this critical transformation. And the conversation about optimizing tenant spaces today goes beyond just energy. Everyone on this call understands the value of energy efficiency, but it's more than thinking about energy optimization and going above code. It's also about leveraging energy efficiency in a more holistic way to gain added value from thoughtful design and the application of high performance standards to create spaces that have the potential to not only reduce the carbon footprint, but also increase employee satisfaction, improve air quality, and critically right now, support human health. So doing this right requires expertise, obviously. So the Commercial Tenant Program provides targeted technical assistance to inform decision makers at the outset of a project about the measures and range of projects that can be taken to optimize energy efficiency, space usage, productivity, and health, so that tenants and building owners can make well-informed investment decisions, whether they are designing a new space or renovating an existing one. Approved consultants in the Commercial Tenant Program can provide this technical assistance for tenants and landlords of commercial spaces anywhere in the state. And crucially, I want to point out that they can also help their clients find these opportunities at any point in the lease cycle. But the commercial tenant program only covers professional consulting services and does not cover funding for purchasing or installing equipment. That's where financing for these projects can really come into play and break down barriers. Commercial tenant program incentives can be used alongside other incentive programs, as well as any of the financing solutions that we'll be talking about today, to provide flexibility to landlords and tenants to address energy efficiency in office spaces. As we'll hear, financing can address the hurdle of upfront costs. This is especially relevant right now, as tenants and landlords need to consider more capital-intensive projects to achieve deeper carbon savings, lower operating expenses, and ensure employee health and wellness. So with that, I'd like to first introduce our speaker, Andrew Kessler from the New York Green Bank. Andrew oversees investments and portfolio management for the New York Green Bank. Over a 25-year career, he has developed extensive experience in corporate and project finance and advisory, as well as operational management, corporate development, and project development. So with that, Andrew, I'll let you take it away. And you might be on mute.
Sorry, I was on mute.
There you go, no problem.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon to talk about this very important topic. Next slide, please. I'm going to cover one more. A quick overview of the New York Green Bank. Well, I'll give you an overview of our on-lease commercial tenant energy efficiency, energy efficient financing structure and framework, and show you some of the structural diagrams that hopefully will provide even further clarity. Next slide. Next slide. Great. So to start off, New York Green Bank, our mission is to accelerate clean energy deployment in New York State to achieve the CLCPA mandates, among others. We are a $1 billion state-sponsored investment fund. We're set up really to identify and address funding gaps in New York State's clean energy markets. A key goal of ours is to crowd in private capital to support investments in our target areas of focus, and I'll talk about more about those in a second. Important to note, we are market-based lenders. That's core to our mission of crowding in private capital. And we are, importantly, a division of NYSERDA and work very closely with our NYSERDA colleagues to advance our respective missions. Next slide, please. You can imagine probably sort of the usual suspects of sectors and asset classes that we're focused on, including wind and solar, including resi, CNI, CDG, storage, clean energy transportation, bioenergy, microgrids, and last and definitely not least, energy efficiency. We actually closed into our $1 billion of deployment last week, so we're super excited to have achieved that milestone. We, of course, are getting repaid on a regular basis from our investments, and so we still have quite a bit of dry powder left, approximately $600 million to continue to deploy into these sectors. We've been incredibly busy these last few months, notwithstanding COVID-19. We've closed 10 transactions year to date, 8 since going full remote in mid-March. So we're very much open for business with a very large and robust and active pipeline of transactions that we're working to close over the following months. Next slide, please. So we are providing highly flexible capital. We can really invest at any level in the capital structure of a project. We are typically project finance oriented investors, so directly investing in projects or portfolios of clean energy assets rather than companies or the sponsors themselves, although we have done that in the past. We are prepared to take long-term, short-term maturities. So again, stressing that the purposeful nature of our mandate is to really have as much flexibility as possible to be able to, once identified, structure financing solutions to address those funding gaps. Next slide, please. We're very pleased to be working with a number of leading developers and private investors, as you can see here, from some of these various counterparties. So that's just a quick overview of the New York Green Bank. Obviously, welcome any dialogue with anyone in the audience on opportunities within energy efficiency or otherwise going forward. Let's kick off the on-lease commercial tenant financing framework. Slide, please. So we're looking to provide, with respect to this offering, this product, to provide funding that enables owners and managers of commercial buildings to offer their commercial tenants an innovative financing option to make energy efficiency improvements. So let me talk about some of the key benefits to that with respect to advantages for building owners. So we will be providing capital directly to tenants through this program. I'll show you how that works in a second. At no cost to the owner and without recourse to the owner. Two, more efficient, obviously more efficient tenant spaces reduces loads on base building systems, reducing building operating costs while increasing the asset value itself. So obviously a key benefit here for building owners. Three, higher building letter grades under Local Law 33 would be a result of these activities. Lower compliance costs, fewer penalties under Local Law 97, both of which measure whole building energy use, including tenant spaces, not just the owner's operations. Four, owner, obviously through this structure, will continue to manage all aspects of the landlord-tenant relationship, so we're striving not to get in the middle of that. And lastly, in terms of benefits for the owners, they can earn origination and servicing fees from the New York Green Bank for loans that they are able to place with their commercial tenants. Key advantages for tenants themselves: no upfront costs. We will finance up to 100% of both hard and soft costs of energy efficiency upgrades. Quick returns. The way we're structuring this thing, our loans are structured so that the monthly debt service payments are less than the projected monthly energy cost savings, which results in positive cash flow as soon as the projects are placed in service. Broad and flexible range of energy efficiency measures. So highly flexible in terms of whether it's fit outs or renovations, expansion of space, retrofits, etc. And we can combine our program with the commercial tenant program that was just introduced, which obviously offers a low-cost, cost-sharing program for the consultant's fees. And lastly, in addition to the financial benefits, we're obviously another key benefit for tenants is just simply to create highly efficient spaces to help satisfy the growing demands of customers, employees, investors for carbon neutral operations. Let's kick it off to the next slide, please. So I've covered already a lot of this, but just to maybe identify a couple things I didn't say. We think this program is highly scalable and replicable in its design that will create efficiency and standardization. So we're looking forward to launching this and expanding it over the course of the next several months. Next slide. So let me get into the proposed approach. And this will become more clear when I show you the structure. But what we would do is enter into a master servicing agreement between the New York Green Bank and the property manager or owner to enable the property owner or manager to offer commercial tenants this financing option for them to make energy efficiency upgrades to their tenant spaces. So the owner manager would serve as the originator and servicer of our loans to their tenants. Again, the tenant's monthly debt service with respect to this loan would be structured so that it's no greater than the anticipated savings. And with respect to billing or invoicing, we're looking for a very efficient way of doing that by adding it to the tenant's monthly rent payment. So don't have to have the tenants send another payment to us, but rather add it as an additional rent line item that would be collected like the rent normally would be by the owner manager, and owner manager would remit that, our portion of that, the principal and interest of the loan, to the New York Green Bank. We would look to do a simple amendment to the tenant lease at the time of closing to codify what energy efficiency improvements we're investing in, we're funding, and the terms associated with that. And we would also be adding the New York Green Bank as a third-party beneficiary with direct contractual claim against tenant, separate from and independent of any lease obligations for any unpaid debt service payments. Next slide, please. The transaction is structured to be non-recourse to the owner or manager, except as it relates to agreed upon performance obligations under the master servicing agreement I discussed earlier. As mentioned, the owner manager would be eligible for loan origination and performance-based servicing fees from the New York Green Bank. And with respect to non-payment or partial payment of rent or debt service, we're prepared to share that loss pro rata or prepared to take a first loss position on that. So that's the overall program. Again, it's a critical piece of this program. Next slide, maybe just to get into the structure. The foundation of this program really lies between the relationship and collaboration between the property owner manager and the New York Green Bank. It's by leveraging what they're already doing and doing well that we're able to offer this product on a highly efficient basis. So again, you've got this master servicing agreement between New York Green Bank and the property manager or owner. Owner manager is serving as originator and servicer of our loans. Those loans are non-recourse, as mentioned. The master servicing agreement sets forth the underwriting criteria, the credit and use of proceeds parameters, the debt servicing terms and responsibilities, such as billing, remittance, events of notification and arrears, non-payment protocols, would all be codified within that master servicing agreement. The loan itself, however, is between New York Green Bank and commercial tenant. And again, that would be codified via an amendment to the lease, identifying the improvements and the terms, and adding the New York Green Bank as a third-party beneficiary. So that's the setup. If we go to the next slide, it would be the sort of the proposed way funds would flow during the construction or installation phase. So hopefully tenant learns about this exciting program through the owner manager of the building, is able to perhaps leverage the commercial tenant program that we just discussed to offset the costs of identifying what makes sense for that space, reaches out to the property owner manager requesting funding for an improvement. Property owner manager determines whether that request meets the definition of an eligible project as agreed and scoped out within the master servicing agreement. The lease would be amended as discussed. We would then fund the installation and construction of that project, and transfer that funding to the tenant. Tenant would then fund the contractor requisitions to have these improvements placed in service. So that's how the construction phase of flow of funds would work. On an ongoing basis, pretty straightforward. Every month, owner manager is issuing a monthly rent bill to tenants, and that will include a line item for the debt service associated with the New York Green Bank loan. Tenant pays a single payment to the property owner manager. Property owner manager retains their rent and remits the debt service to the New York Green Bank. So that's sort of the ongoing setup in terms of how cash flow would move. So I'm gonna pause at this point. I went through that fairly quickly, hoping that we could have a dialogue with questions from the audience. I'm not sure if we're waiting for that at the tail end of this, or whether we can do that now over the next 5 minutes.
We actually have a couple minutes, Andrew, if you wanted to take a couple of questions, maybe one or two before we move on. So let's see, I'm just scanning the excellent questions that have come in. So just to clarify here, would the owner or manager taking on debt, would the owner or manager be the one taking on debt, or is it off balance sheet?
It's completely off balance sheet, and I wouldn't even call it off balance sheet. The owner manager is not a party to this financing at all. It's a direct loan between the New York Green Bank and commercial tenant. We're just leveraging the existing relationship between owner manager and tenant to create efficiencies. So we don't have to collect the debt service. They're already collecting monthly rent. We don't have to manage and diligence and oversee the improvement and its installation. They already have protocols for that embedded in the commercial leases, tenant leases, for those types of procedures. So this property owner manager is providing services that, if implemented, if the improvements are put into place, leads to increased value of their building. And of course, tenant is benefiting as well from having those improvements put in place to lower their energy costs.
So then would it be that the tenant takes on the debt?
The tenant takes on the debt. The debt is the tenant's responsibility, and they will be billed for that debt service on a monthly basis as part of their rent invoicing.
Okay, and we have a question just about a major project that someone's working on where they can use utility rebates to cover 70% probably of the equipment costs, and asking kind of for some general guidelines about what you are interested in funding, what the Green Bank's looking for, I guess, in a project, I think would be the most general way to ask this.
I mean, we're really, we've got a list of eligible projects that I don't think we have to share but it's really anything that's can be put in place that has a strong track record that we can understand what the highly likely energy savings would be for those improvements. So it's unlikely that we're going to fund into brand new technologies, unproven technologies, but certainly anything that is fairly straightforward and has a track record where, again, we can structure the debt service to be no greater than the anticipated savings, even if that means the maturity is quite extended. Those improvements would all be eligible.
And does this apply? Could you apply this in, one person's asking, in malls or other kind of commercial spaces besides offices?
We can, as long as we have that an agreement with some analogy to the property owner manager, like we have in a commercial building. So if it's a mall and there's a property manager, and it seems very analogous. So yes, we could, where the mall tenants are paying a monthly fee to the mall manager. It seems like it would be highly analogous. Yes.
And can you just spell out, is this how, is the funding tied to you said the payment would be less than the expected savings that the tenant would achieve? So in that way, is it, similar to a performance-based loan?
It is, except we're not taking performance risk. So we would, rely on the studies, that had been done, demonstrating what the anticipated savings are likely to be. Again, the more mature and these improvements are, where there's a very strong track record and therefore highly likelihood that those energy savings would play out, we would look to structure the debt service to be no greater than those anticipated savings. So this is sort of in the money to begin with at installation for the commercial tenant. But should those improvements not be maintained or utilized correctly, or for some other reason, those energy savings would not play out as projected, as expected, we're not taking that risk. There was still the debt service that is due from the loan would be payable to the New York Green Bank, irrespective.
Right. I see. Okay, great. Well, let's table this for now, and we'll go to Patrick, and then we'll come back with both of you and see if there's any questions for the two of you.
Great, thanks.
And thank you very much, Andrew. So I'll welcome next Patrick O'Donnell. Patrick provides technical due diligence, risk management, and construction surveillance for loan transactions. He also assists in the development and implementation of NYCEEC's policies and best practices with regard to energy efficiency and building technologies. So Patrick, I'll let you take it away, and I will stop sharing my screen so you can take over.
Great. Thank you so much, Elihu. I'm just pulling up the deck here. All right. So let me just get on presenter view. Great. Well, I'll get started right away here. Thank you so much, Elihu, for the intro, and also to Sophie Cardona, Senior Project Manager at NYSERDA, who reached out. We're really happy to be part of this. We think it's an important resource for people doing the audits, implementing these projects. And so I'll jump right in. Also, thank you to Andrew Kessler, co-panelist here, and the New York Green Bank. NYCEEC. So if your project saves energy, we can finance it. That's the 5-second elevator pitch for NYCEEC, New York City Energy Efficiency Corporation. We are a clean energy lender. We're like a bank with an engineer. We've mobilized over $150 million in capital across all sectors: commercial, industrial, multifamily, both market rate and affordable. Only thing we don't do is single family residential. We do both construction and term lending. We work in an 8-state region from Massachusetts to Maryland, including District of Columbia. The last couple of years, we've closed and completed numerous projects outside of the state of New York. So we're slowly expanding. The 8-state region, and DC is a development as of about 1.5 years, 2 years ago. Great. So we look at financing as an implementation tool. And you see the 5X on the screen. Andrew talked a little bit about, leveraging the existing infrastructure with their billing. We think of financing generally as the same thing. We're just like energy efficiency. It's all about doing more with less. It's about leveraging the capital that's invested, and the 5X represents kind of your typical loan where the borrower is putting 20% equity down, and you can get 5 times the project. And so that's really important when we're talking about how financing can help the borrower implement a project, period. So in some cases, borrowers that we've worked with, wouldn't be able to do the project without financing. Another key point is that they're able to do a bigger and better project. So that means a deeper retrofit, or sooner. They may be able to invest in a bigger project, a deeper retrofit sooner. And I want to just highlight the time frame because of the, the compliance for Local Law 97, the letter grades, and every day that goes by that you're not implementing a project, you're not realizing the savings. Another important point that I want to make on this webinar is about something that Elihu brought up earlier about the investment decisions that we're making, and greater CapEx expenditure needed to achieve the goals that we're looking at for the city, and to get more efficiency work done. And a big difference with financing versus paying cash for a project is that we're really looking at taking that whole total project cost and amortizing it over a fixed number of years. So in that way, you can have little out of pocket cost, and pay for these projects based on cash flow, versus the first cost. And we'll go over an example in a second. These loans on a basic level is just like the home mortgage that many are, home loan that people are used to. And you can choose a better location. You can upgrade to a smart home, or popular now, you can get a house with an outdoor space. You can use financing to play around a little bit with what you can do with a smaller amount of capital. And while the client is responsible for paying back the loans, they're also splitting the upfront risk, or splitting the risk of the upfront cost with us as a lender. So that's another important point. When you take out a loan, it's not just like, okay, I took out the loan, all the risk is on me, I got to pay this back. While that, it's true that you have to pay it back, we're actually taking on risk as well. So, in these uncertain times, we're leveraging existing capital. We're also taking on risk with the tenant, with the borrower. And getting specifically to tenant spaces, it's really an untapped market. Like Elihu said, greater than 50% of energy in commercial buildings is used in tenant spaces. Full transparency, NYCEEC to date has done 0 loans to commercial tenants. We've done quite a few commercial loans. We've looked at a few commercial tenant deals, but have yet to close one. We think this is a opportunity that's ripe, to provide more services and ultimately get more efficiency work done in this space. So let's look at an example. Okay, so you're an auditor. The audit results are in. You have your audit report. What you see on the screen here is the list of energy conservation measures, ECMs, with 2 options. Option A, the existing VAV system with a number of energy conservation measures sprinkled in, installed demand control ventilation, replace the T12 lighting with LED, etc. Total option A cost $122,500, with savings of $21,350 per year, with a simple payback of 5.7 years. Option B, also on the table, the owner had asked to look into a VRF system, replacing the existing VAV, or the tenant, sorry. And so option B includes all the non-VAV ECMs, plus replacing the existing VAV with the VRF heat pump system. That's $194,250 total cost, with a simple payback of 8.6 years. Okay, so you get to the audit report out. This is auditor and client, and they break the hard news to you. Okay, we got this, all looks great, we love it, we want to do more, but we only have a $40,000 budget. So they pick and choose, the measures that that they think they can afford. You see the 7 measures, $37,000 implementation cost. It meets the $40,000 budget. And look, they get close to $10,000 in savings per year with a 3.8-year payback, less than 5 years. You know, not bad. They keep the old VAV system. Now let's look at this, a secondary scenario with the same $40,000 budget in financing. So in this scenario, you can see that all the non-VAV ECMs, so all the other conservation measures that don't apply to the VAV system, can be implemented, in addition to replacing the old VAV system with the new VRF heat pump system. The total cost is $194,250 with annual savings of $22,600 per year and a payback of 8.6 years. Looking at the loan details, with the owner equity, if the $40,000 budget is used to pay the loan down payment, still meets the budget. That leaves a balance of $155,400 loan amount and a term of 10 years, which we structure, we can structure based on the payback term. So if you look at 8.6 years, add in some loan interest and fees, we say a 10-year loan, you end up with a interest rate at 6%, by the way. You end up with a yearly payment of $20,703 per year. So we can kind of run through the advantages of the loan. For one, it's a fully amortizing loan, including interest and interest on the loan. The yearly payment is less than the projected savings. So on top of having a new system, and end of the year, there's still some gravy for the owner. After 10 years, the borrower can realize the full value of the savings. But more than that, they achieve several other important goals, which is a new HVAC system, which is something that they wanted, something easier to control, doesn't require an energy engineer or a complex BAS system to control, with better thermal comfort, you know, a regulated ventilation system with the energy recovery ventilators, item number 10, better lighting, increased worker productivity. So you can, I wanted to put this in here for how some of these scenarios can normally play out and the advantage of being able to do more with financing as a resource to implement these projects. Okay, so one important piece to all this is really connecting the dots for clients. So, you know, as an auditor, engineer, architect working on these projects, identifying the opportunities, you know, your audit is looking at savings opportunities, energy, water, O&M, capital improvements, major HVAC replacements, renewable CHP, and then the health and safety code compliance, getting the job done right, commissioning. What we really like to see as well is the implementation next steps. So as architects and engineers working on these projects, you're really well positioned to connect these dots. So you're identifying what the opportunity is, how much is it going to cost to implement, what are the savings, and then also looking at what are the next steps for each of the measures. One novel way that I've seen to do that is by each ECM, say if it's replace incandescent lighting with LED, the next step is, well, tell your super to buy LEDs and replace those lights. If it's install or replace your VAV system with a VRF heat pump system, the next step would be hire an engineer, do the design, and then bid that design out to contractors. Or maybe hire contractors directly. It just depends, but that guidance is really helpful for the decision makers, whether it be the tenant or building owner. And, you know, us as design and energy consulting professionals, you know, we're well positioned to do that. Okay, getting to understanding the role of financing in my project on a little bit deeper level, we thought it would be really helpful just to put the questions out there that you can be asking yourself and your client as you go through the process of understanding what the needs are and does financing make sense for my situation. Okay, so how much cash is available? What is the budget? Asking that early can be really helpful in bringing these implementation resources up and talking about them. Is there a need to preserve cash during uncertain times? Something I mentioned earlier. Some loans that we've done, it's not that people don't have the money to do a project, they just don't want to spend it, and they still want to do the project. So financing is a way to do that. It's a way to preserve cash, and really, if you think about it, it's us spending the cash as the lender along with the owner. So another point is, are there competing priorities for a build-out budget on a commercial tenant space? Understand what those is. Get a deeper understanding of how your customer is looking at these projects. Are there payback requirements? What are the financial metrics that they're using to prioritize spending their capital? Are there systems that provide more worker productivity, including thermal comfort, lighting, but don't make the cut? See if those are issues or concerns or needs that a client may have. Are there impending sustainability, energy, ESG, or city laws that may be met but are getting value engineered out, or more often delayed? Okay, yeah, we can't do this on this project, but we'll get to it by the time it's due. ESG, by the way, is environmental social governance. It's kind of a new fancy corporate lingo that companies are investing in those areas, and a lot of times there's sustainability or energy incorporated into that. Something to look into. And what's the cost of doing nothing? Are O&M costs going to continue to increase? Is there compliance costs or fines, like Andrew mentioned? The lack of marketing, lack of employee engagement. What is the cost of doing nothing? There typically are, and it's something to explore and figure out with the client. And finally, is financing right for every project? We would be the first to say no. We've looked at a lot of projects that aren't eligible, or it's not a good fit, or it doesn't make sense. So it's not for every project, but many it can be a benefit. So general rules of thumb. So kind of the most typical equipment loan, or I shouldn't say that. The most typical terms for loans and types. Packages of ECM measures, 10 years or less. Loan sizes of 100,000 to 2 million. Interest rates, we saw the 6%, that's kind of middle of the road, but we have interest rates listed on our website, depending on the type of project. 20% down payment is pretty typical. The types of loans that are available, what we looked at before is like a basic equipment loan, but there's also different implementation and financing models through energy savings agreements, ESAs, or EAAS, which is energy as a service. In that case, the borrower is the ESA or EAS provider. So that's a little bit different than the commercial tenant being the borrower, or the owner being the borrower. And then there's also CPACE, which, fingers crossed, will come online by end of this year or early next calendar year. NYCEEC is going to be the New York City administrator for this program. And I believe that, borrowers that have a property tax bill should be eligible for CPACE financing, which offers lower cost and longer term financing. Tenant themselves may not be if they don't pay the property tax bill, but that's something that we're thinking about and trying to be creative with. And there's more information on FAQ with the link. And as Ellie mentioned, we're going to provide the slides after the presentation. So information transforms uncertainty into risk. So, financing is an extra step in the process. It takes some extra time. Banks are risk averse. We really need to get comfortable with who's doing the project, what is the project, and does it make sense? But with the right information on the project and the borrower, we can transform this uncertainty into risk, and risk is something that we can manage. And kind of part of any financing organization is managing and understanding and managing different types of technical and financial risk. So what are we looking for when we're looking at a project? Well, these projects, we're looking at what's the scope of work, what are the savings, who is paying for the equipment, who will provide O&M, how long is left on the lease, and we'll need to see 3 years of borrower financial operating history. How to incorporate financing into projects with clients, ask and listen, do this early, do it at the first pre-audit conference or call. We love to see implementation next steps in the audit reports, as I mentioned. And then, of course, engaging in conversation with a lender, either yourself or with your client, and just getting your questions answered. A lot of this is just getting familiar with the idea of using a debt tool to do the work. So wrapping up, really, we view financing is helping to unlock maximum value. So, energy efficiency, we look at it also as a resource. Finding, constant speed fan is like finding a little gold nugget. Finding incandescent lighting and electric resistance heating is a little bit more like finding a 1 kilogram gold ingot. Both are still gold, but they need to be mined and realized to have value. And we're well positioned to kind of help owners and tenants connect all these dots and look at all the resources available to try and extract maximum value. We kind of look at each project as a mini business model. So unlocking the savings is kind of the value, and how do we not only identifying what that value is, but how do we help our client best understand not only the benefits, but how to unlock that. And if we want to achieve greater and deeper savings, something that we have never had, we're going to have to do things that we've never done. So I just encourage, in closing, everyone to think about their resources, think about their tools, and think about how best to unlock all the value that we have with efficiency and clean energy. So thank you so much, and time for the Q&A.
Great, thank you so much, Patrick. I'm gonna take the screen back if you don't mind.
Yep.
And we can share some contact information as we do the. All right, great. So as we get into the Q&A, I just wanted to first just touch on, Patrick, a point you made towards the end there. We've got a lot of energy consultants and architects on the call, and I just want to try to reiterate, when in the project should someone who's talking to a tenant or a building owner start to engage them about financing? When's the right moment? And I guess as a follow-up, also, who's the right person when they start that conversation?
Sure. Well, earlier tends to be better, just in terms of getting people comfortable with the ideas. assessing their need or want to explore financing. But really anytime, you know, there's not really, you know, always is a good time. And who is also an important question. It's definitely helpful to engage as early as possible with the financial decision makers. So a lot of times, you know, if you're going through the building for your audit, collecting information, you may be working with, you know, super having, you know, showing you around, unlocking the doors and answering questions about the operating characteristics. But try to make time to, you know, or ask who makes the decisions, you know, for capital improvements, or, you know, what are the capital projects that you're looking at and how do you get those done? Maybe is an easier way to ask it. And, oh, well, we go through this process, we meet with a small, you know, board, I present the projects, et cetera. So you start to learn, you know, how their decision-making process around, you know, capital improvements or any improvements works. So whoever it may be, it is important to try and figure out who that is and talk with them if you can, and see if you can loop them in. Oh, okay, well, is it possible that, you know, we can share the results, the initial results of this walkthrough with that group or with that person?
Mm-hmm. I wanted to come back to the carbon question here, that there are somebody asked in the chat here, you know, there are measures that will decrease carbon and maybe not on the energy saving side. Is there any, you know, credit awarded or anything like that do we see carbon in the financing story here? Is there carbon savings accounted for, especially in light of 97 or maybe other costs associated with having a high carbon?
Sure. Yeah, carbon. It's a great question. Carbon is really at the center of our mission at NYCEEC. I gave a drastically simplified explanation, just talking about energy savings. We have financed one energy storage project, which is, you know, a carbon saving measure, along with, you know, utility cost savings, and a number of CHP, combined heat and power projects as well, that don't save site energy, but do save carbon. So, you know, that's extremely important. And, you know, that ultimately, when I talk about energy savings, you know, everything sort of leads to carbon, and we're looking at that impact. And the reason I initially explained it as energy, they're not the same thing, of course, but it gets to a deeper point where, you know, we want to start talking in terms of carbon. We want people in the sector, building owners, you know, they're going to have to meet carbon thresholds, for example. And if we can all start talking in units of carbon and those thresholds, and what we're saving and how these impacts work towards achieving their carbon reduction goals, I think it will help facilitate across kind of all of the disparate sectors involved in these projects, you know, be it the engineers, architects, tradespeople, financing, building owners, tenants. You know, everybody kind of describes these things as in a different way. And so to the point of talking in carbon terms, I think is really valuable. And those are the goals that the city and the state have. They're measuring those in terms of carbon.
Thanks. Now I have a question for Andrew. Coming back to the on-lease financing program, how would a building owner or manager, you know, who's trying to reduce the carbon impact of their building, trying to attract tenants by creating new spaces and efficient spaces, how would they get involved in this on-lease financing option? And then also, how would they how would they get the word out about it to their tenants? How would you recommend that going?
Yeah, so we've been engaged in dialogues with property owners and managers now for, you know, the last almost year plus about this concept. And So most of them are aware of it, and some of them were in dialogues about identifying a building or two or a portfolio of buildings to roll this out. Once that arrangement was put in place for a specific building or buildings, we would work with the property owner to develop materials that they would make available to tenants to let them know how this works, why it benefits them, and how they can seek financing for energy efficiency improvements in their tenant spaces with New York Green Bank Capital.
Okay, great. Anything on the tenant side, that tenants can do to?
Yeah, absolutely, sure. I mean, we know that certainly owners and managers listen to their tenants, and to the extent that tenants would find this valuable and enough find them valuable and relay that interest in the program to the property owner manager, that obviously is helpful in getting an agreement in place between the New York Green Bank and the property owner manager. But this program really, the linchpin is the agreement, the services agreement between the New York Green Bank and the property owner manager, for the property owner manager to provide key services to make these financings efficient. We're not retail lenders, so we're about 30 professionals. We can't be evaluating credit, billing, small loans. We've got 40 investments at this stage, so we'd love to have dozens, hundreds of these, and we can do that. And we can do that by leveraging and partnering with someone like a property owner manager that is doing a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of originating these loans, ensuring that they fit the box from an eligibility perspective, doing the billing. They've already done credit checks on their tenants. So we know that they know, what the credit risk is for a tenant. We don't have to recreate the wheel with this framework. We can leverage already working well, what already exists, and enable us to deploy hopefully significant capital across very small loans across New York State, and still do that with the resources we have within the mandate that we live in.
Okay, great. Well, look, I want to be respectful of everybody's time here, and we're at the little bit past the 2 o'clock hour. So I'll just close with this. There's a lot of contact information on the slide here. The slides will go out to everyone afterwards, and I'll see if we can get an email address for NYCEEC and for the Green Bank, just if people have follow-up questions. There's a lot of questions we didn't get to, which is great to see. I'm sorry we didn't get to them, but it's great to see the engagement here. And please be in touch. The slides will have this link here at the bottom if you'd like to set up a meeting with the commercial tenant program, and we can talk through any of these questions here. And I just want to thank Andrew and Patrick here for taking the time talking to us again about these financing options. It's going to open up a whole new world, I think, for commercial buildings meeting some of these tough targets, and also lowering operating costs. So just want to once again thank you both. And with that, have a good rest of your day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elihu. Pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Bye-bye.